what if I broke my brain with these drugs? And you hear like stories about people really messing up with those substances, and so I was deathly afraid of that. I was feeling really bad that I did this to myself. If there's no turning back, I really just screwed up my whole life forever. I felt like reality itself was collapsing in on itself, with me at the center of it.
Hey everyone, I'm Sean O'Connor, author of the Depersonalization Manual, and today I'm speaking with Hans Askelaxby from Norway. Hans is 22 years old. He first developed DPDR back in 2020 following a terrifying LSD experience. When I first heard from Hans, he said the following, quote, "I feel so broken. My sense of reality is completely out of whack, and I feel like I'm just living in an endless acid trip. I just don't see myself recovering or feeling normal in any sense. Like I've completely changed my brain or my most inner core of my being," end quote. A terrifying experience for sure, but thankfully Hans has since made a complete recovery, and he's with us today to talk about his experience with and recovery from DPDR. Hans, you're very welcome to the channel. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you. It's nice to see you again, actually.
Yeah, you too. It's great to have you on the channel. Hans, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, I'm 22 years old. And for the past 2 years, I've been studying music production. I'm really into art and music.
What kind of music are you into, or are you producing?
It's rock and blues for the most part, and a little bit ambient music. Yeah, so that's kind of what I do in my spare time, and I work at a flower shop.
Nice.
Sell flowers and stuff right now. So.
Rock, blues, and ambient is a fairly interesting mix. I mean,
it's kind of can create a good ambient, bluesy, soft rock kind of vibe. That's what I like.
Yeah. I was only thinking the other day actually that, on the Brian Eno Apollo album. Like that's all like steel pedal guitar, right? So there's a lot of that stuff in it. So there's kind of always a kind of a strong connection between there's a connection between blues and ambient,
Yeah, absolutely. It's an ambient genre. I feel like a lot of emotions and
Interesting. So anyways, Hans, can you tell us a little bit about your experience with DPDR and how did it start for you?
Yeah, it started. I have a really hard time actually remembering the time sequence or whatever, when it started and when it stopped. But yeah, it started in 2020 in the end of summer, I think. And I had been doing quite a bit of drugs at the time and the years following, like experimenting with mainly psychedelics and weed and stuff. And I didn't think too much of it. It was just something I did. And one day I had just a normal weekend, I guess, and I took some LSD with a friend, and something, you feel really weird on those substances, but something just didn't feel right. And I think I figured out that I was having a panic attack during that episode. And the day went on, and I woke up and just felt terrible. And I just thought, okay, it's okay. You feel weird after such a drug experience. And but it continued, and it didn't get any better. And weeks, maybe a week or two, and it just kept snowballing and getting worse and worse. And I was like, yeah, I was still feeling really high, I guess, and I just really off balance in mentally and in every single way, actually. And so I went to my doctor, which I had a really good relationship with, so I could talk to him about. I didn't feel weird about talking about the drugs and stuff, and I felt so bad that I it didn't matter at all. And so he said, yeah, well, it's after effects of the cocktail of drugs you did. I was like, okay, I can live I can live with this for a couple of days. It's okay. It's gonna be good. But it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. Over a couple of months, I visited, like, I went to a what's it called? Tons of different doctors.
You went to a neurologist, was this, Hans?
Neurologist, yes.
Okay.
And went to get my brain scanned, and my psychiatrist, and just really trying to figure it out, because it still hadn't hit me fully. I was still kind of experiencing the start of it, I feel like, and it hadn't accumulated totally. And yeah, eventually it peaked, kind of. It was, and yeah, I don't know what to say. It was really bad. Do you want me to describe, like, the symptoms I had? Because I feel like mine were really bad, as everyone thinks with
DPDR.
DPDR.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And just with the just backtrack a little bit, Hans, with the acid experience as well. So did it when you took that? So you were with a friend, is that right? Yeah. So when you took it, like, did it kind of start to go bad, like, straight away, or was it kind of a while into it? And was it just that it was kind of more intense than you anticipated, or?
It felt different than I anticipated, and it built up over the evening. Looking back on it, it was just a massive panic attack on these substances, which, it's not unheard of to get panic attacks, and
oh no, it's very, very common.
Really,
and with acid as well. Like, I mean, it's if acid goes wrong, or like if you start to panic on it, it's like there is, it's you're in for, like, kind of like 10-12 hours of a bad time.
Yeah.
Like, it's I mean, I think with other drugs, like, you can often, if you're not having a great time, you can at least kind of, like, check the watch, But
Yeah.
with acid, it's renowned for, like, it's, you just kind of, like, the only way out is through, as they say. So having a panic attack on a psychedelic drug that lasts that long can be a very, very difficult experience, for sure.
Yeah, it takes a toll on. It really screws up. Yeah, the mind gets real tired of it, to say the least.
Yeah. So what did you when afterwards, Hans? What did you kind of think? What was your interpretation of it at that point? Were you kind of saying, like, did you think, like, oh, I've been kind of exhausted by it, or I feel a bit kind of, maybe there's some of the acid still in my system or something, or what were you thinking at that stage?
Yeah, I was thinking that it was just the aftermath of a really, hard experience on the brain, and I thought, okay, yeah, just take some time to recalibrate and recuperate.
Yeah.
But as it got worse after time, just like a couple of weeks, I I just kind of switched like this mode of thinking that oh no, okay, I've really done it now. I'm this really going to be, what if I broke my brain with these drugs? And you hear like stories about people really messing up with those substances, and so I was deathly afraid of that. Yeah, so I remember when the thought process kind of hit me that, okay, am I really going to feel normal again? Is this my life now? And I remember feeling extreme guilt and fear. It was still very early in the process, but I was, I was feeling really bad that I did this to myself, and if there's no turning back, I really just screwed up my whole life forever.
Yeah. It's also such a common thing. Even the phrase like I was worried that I broke my brain. Like I remember literally thinking those words, like I have broken my brain with I took too much weed and I broke my brain. And guilt as well, like really the sense that like why did I do that? Like, and what was I thinking? And I'm going to be one of those stories. Like, I'm going to be one of those people who, like, visits schools to warn children. I wanted to work in film, but I'm just warning children now. Like, Yeah, I mean, it's a very scary experience. So after speaking to the doctor, and the weeks go on, presumably you're still searching for answers and you're looking up the symptoms online and such.
Yeah, I was really starting to Google and trying to find because all the doctors and stuff say you're fine. You're not schizophrenic. I was really starting to think that I was schizophrenic because as the time went on, the main the worst symptom of DPDR, I feel like, is I felt like reality itself was collapsing in on itself with me at the center of it, and so I could only compare it to a really bad acid trip. So I thought, okay, schizophrenia, that sounds right. This is or something like that. But all the doctors, said, okay, you're not schizophrenic. Your brain works fine. I thought I had, how do you say it? I thought my cognitive abilities had just like flattened out because I felt so numb and so disconnected from everything, but still I felt so. It was really weird because even though I felt so numb and disconnected, I felt so much existential dread and just all these somatic symptoms. This really brutal feelings of unreality and just you're floating around and nothing feels real. So just jumping ahead, like to now, it's crazy how serious it feels and how detrimental the feeling of DPDR is compared to what it actually is. It's not, you feel like you're actually you feel like you're in serious trouble, right? But it's actually, you're actually not. So it's strange to think about.
Certainly. And Hans, at what points did you find out it was called depersonalization? Did you come across the term on Google, or did somebody mention it to you or something?
Yeah, I was actually I came across it pretty early, actually. But I was it's still I didn't think it was only depersonalization. I guess I still thought there was something more, because I started reading all these posts on Reddit and whatnot, and some just felt didn't feel so severe, and the way they described the symptoms didn't really, I was hyper analyzing every single symptom that I had and kind of blowing it up. So for me, it felt so much worse than the descriptions of it online. But it matched, so I thought, okay, I might have a little bit of this, but I still think I'm brain dead. So it took a long time before I found out and kind of settled on the idea that this is depersonalization. And I think that's the point where I discovered, like, watching YouTube videos, and I found your channel and stuff. Yeah.
And when you found the term depersonalization, Hans, did you get a sense of relief out of that, or were you? I remember for me, when I found the term, I was really, really happy. But then I just, like, my whole life became about. It just became my full-time job, was just like researching DPDR all the time.
Yeah, it kind of same for me. It was a relief at the beginning, but then I started. I think everyone does this, and it's bad, because how invested you become in checking and reading and trying to kind of think your way through it by reading all this, and trying to, like, figure out the recipe, or
I think that's a really good way of describing it, is that, like, you're trying to find the recipe for recovery, and it's like there's all these different ingredients that I have to find, and one might be from a forum that I saw, and another's from a YouTube video, and another's from a book I read, and another's from a tip that my cousin who smokes weed tells me, like, and if I could take all these things and just adjust them properly and put them together, then I'll understand what this is, and then it'll disappear. But that's like that's not how recovery from any anxiety-based condition works. That's not how changing any habit of thought works. But it creates this kind of sense of, like, trying to get, like, this puzzle, this recipe exactly right, which just makes us more obsessed with it, and just makes us think, what if I tweak this, or I change this, or whatever. And sure, then for me, I was just at the computer day in, day out, like, and this was 2005 as well, where there was almost relative to now, anyway, there was so little information out there about it, but that became my obsession for a long time.
Yeah, for me too. It's a vicious cycle, but for me, it felt like the only thing that was worthwhile, doing, because life had just stopped completely. There was no tangible piece of reality that I could hold on to. So, but yeah, I felt that also, that I was sabotaging myself after a while, because I was sitting with friends and trying to have a good time, and I was just sitting on my phone all the time reading these posts, and they would give me a sense of relief in like 2 seconds, and I was like, oh, okay, I figured it out. And then more questions came up. What if I'm what if this never goes away? What if this never goes away? And it's it's bad how how much you're sabotaging yourself with that.
And at this point, Hans, like, were you working, or were you in college, or were you studying, or what was happening in your life?
I was studying art in it's like a 1 year kind of free year, I guess, where you go. It's something in Norway called folkehøyskole, which is like I don't know how to call it. It's kind of kindergarten for adults, I guess. Just wanting to take a break and learn something new and stuff.
Nice.
And I got DPDR like a couple of months, maybe 6 months before I went there, and I was thinking how I'm going to move far away, and I'm going to have a good time, you know. How am I? It's not possible. How can I go there? But I think it was a real good point actually to go there, because it forced me to. This is what I'm thinking in retrospect. It forced me to not just sit and worry about this, even though I did that as well there. But I had so many distractions. I had to go to class. I get to know other people, do a lot of stuff. It was just full-time thing, and so I'm really glad that I went. So it was actually the perfect place to work at that. I feel like, in retrospect.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a similar experience. I went back to college in the second year of my having DPDR. Like at the time, I just thought, like, I can't do this. Like, there's no way I'll be able to do this. But I was so frustrated at that point that I thought, well, I either push myself to make a change, or I just, sit around here and spend my life trying to research it, and that doesn't seem to be helping.
Yeah.
And when I started college, it was a master's degree, but it just felt so difficult. But then same thing as you've been describing, Hans, like, I just started to see that, like, when my mind was consistently engaged in different things, and I had to have work done, I had to socialize, I had to attend events and things. It was just like the best thing I could have done, because I was just taking more attention away from the anxiety. What would have been your lowest point in the experience, Hans? Is there a particular time that sticks with you?
I've thought about this actually. I'm not really sure, but for me, it lasted for, I think, full on. It lasted for about 1.5 years, maybe around 2 years. I'm not too sure on the timeline, because I've kind of forgotten it. But I there's not a specific time that I remember that was the worst, but it was consistently hell for a good time.
Yeah. I mean, when something like that hits you, and it is, I mean, I had an extended period of time like that as well, where it was 24/7. I was having nightmares about it, and then waking up into panic attacks, and just wondering how on earth I was even going to start addressing this. Like, when I didn't know why it was happening. I didn't know anybody else that it happened to. I couldn't even describe what was going on. It was very, very frightening. But with all that said, anyways, Hans, how did your recovery start? How did you start to bring yourself out of that?
Yeah, I think it started really getting better after I talked to you, and after I, I read your book, the ebook, and I followed that quite religiously after throughout a long time, every day. Used it, I was walking in the woods every day, which is something that felt terrible when I was suffering at my peak, because the more sensory information I got, it seemed like it got worse. Yeah, but it started when I really thought to myself, okay, kind of like you, I guess. I have to really just take a step back, actually, and kind of breathe and just try to put it in a different light, because this obsession and constant research and everything, just it didn't work. So I have to come to the rational decision that, okay, let's try to fix this. And so I think that's when I made an appointment with you. And I remember through the interview, I was very totally discombobulated. I was so worried that I wouldn't pick up information. So I'm glad I recorded it and everything, so I watched it back. But it started when I realized that I'm not psychotic. It's nothing seriously dysfunctional. I just have to kind of breathe and look at it differently. And when I kind of got the hang of redirecting my focus, it really just went on. And there wasn't a point where I felt totally recovery. Wasn't at all what I thought, actually. I thought it was going to be like one day it just kind of melted. But it was more like a fog, actually, if I can use that analogy. It used to be super, super thick, and all you can see is the fog. It just slowly starts to decrease. And of course, it's a real relief when you feel it releasing, but you catch yourself having a good few minutes or a good hour, then back on to the panic. So it kind of goes like that for me. But it just slowly started to shrink, and I just kind of lived with it, because I knew that I couldn't force it to stop, and I couldn't think my way out of it, and there was no pill. I just had to be content with the idea, okay, that this is going to take some time, but it's super worth it,
Yeah. I think when you really kind of realize and like really kind of understand that, like, this is not going to hurt you, and it's not going to turn into anything worse, and it's just your body and brain's defensive mechanism. Like, because when you hear that, I remember hearing that first and going, like, that's not true. Sure, this is like I feel like I'm in a different dimension. Like, this isn't this isn't just anxiety.
Yeah.
But when you see that and you really understand it, like that completely, like, changes your perspective on it, and it takes so much of the power away from the anxiety and DPDR, and as you say, and that's when it starts to melt, and then or the fog starts to dissipate, and like and very much as well, that thing of, like, when you feel it releasing, when you start to have, like, good days with it, and you realize that, like, oh my god, like, like, if I can reduce this by by 20% or 25%, like I can get rid of this. I can get rid of this completely. And it's a very exciting stage, but you also kind of have to be disciplined about it and be like, okay, I can be excited about it, but that doesn't mean I'm going to start, researching it again or
But there's a few like pitfalls along the way that you just have to kind of just be calm, I guess. And there was a good 6 months. Now I feel totally fine. No trace of it whatsoever. But there was a time where it wasn't so bad because it had started to kind of shrink, and but there was a time where I just had to like live with it in harmony, I guess. The symptoms were there, but I didn't feel like I was floating around in a constant acid trip, so there was a kind of a standstill in between the worst part and total recovery. But it was a good time because I feel like now I truly believe that I have found a lot of tools that I can work with if I, in other forms of mental crisis or whatever. But the one part for me that I was also struggling with was I've always had a lot of anxiety when I was a kid, and I still have anxiety, but in a different way. And so, I knew anxiety very well, and I had learned to work with it and don't let it take control. And when I experienced this, that's why it's so hard to believe that it is anxiety, because it doesn't feel like anxiety. So that was a real, as you said, a real turning point when you kind of understand the mechanics of how it works, and that it's a normal reaction, actually.
But like it's that it doesn't feel like, when we experience it first, we think, well, this doesn't feel like anxiety, this is different. But the thing is that it doesn't feel like the anxiety that we're used to experiencing. But the anxiety we're used to experiencing is the anxiety we feel before like a college exam, or I don't know, going traveling or something, just those natural kind of like, moments of kind of hesitancy or whatever. But this anxiety is more based on fight or flight. So it's based on the anxiety that you feel, that you experience in a life or death situation, and it's a different set of symptoms. And when you're experiencing those like DEFCON 1 symptoms, when you're not in any danger, then you immediately start to focus it back on yourself, and you think, well, there's something wrong with me. I'm going crazy. Something terrible is happening. And the thing you mentioned as well, Hans, about there being the kind of the period of during recovery where you kind of just have to live with it. And it's a nice way of putting it, because what I often say to people is like, you just kind of have to accept for a while that like, okay, I'm like, I can't just like switch the anxiety off. Like you'll get there, but you can't, it's not just a light switch. It's not finding the recipe, as we were talking about earlier. Find the recipe and turn off the anxiety. You kind of have to accept that, like, for the moment, anxiety is there, but that's anxiety doing its job. It's actually trying to protect you, but it's just happening at the wrong time. And you just kind of have to say, okay, thanks for that, anxiety. I don't need to have you around. I'm going to let you be there, but I'm going to do my own thing. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's actually a great way of communicating to it, to your brain and to the anxiety, that it doesn't need to be there, as opposed to kind of pointing at it and saying, no, but why is this happening? Why is this happening? Which just feeds the anxiety and keeps it going.
Yeah.
And so, Hans, after that, when you recovered completely, so was this something that kind of like happened in the background while you were working, socializing and things, or was it, I mean, for me, for example, it was, I realized that I just stopped caring about it. And I would have days and days and then weeks where I would just think like, oh, I didn't think about the anxiety or DPDR at all, because I was too busy working on a project or hanging out with my friends or whatever. But was it something similar for you?
Yeah, very similar. When it was kind of just there, it was a really liberating. I kind of felt like I had won at that point, because I wasn't giving my attention to it, and I was just, it was still there for a long time. But yeah, as you say, it's just socializing, and I was studying music production, and just letting it work its magic by itself, I guess, and just you kind of you have to find life again, I feel like, and start actively living life for it to, but it's almost impossible to think like that, when you're at your worst. Yeah, but it was a real liberating feeling, even though it was still there. It was like, it's okay. It's going to be okay. Like,
yeah. So now that you've recovered, Hans, is, people always ask me this question: is getting back to normal really getting back to normal?
Yeah, it's yeah, I'd say so. Absolutely. It's as I commented on one of your videos, it's I find quite a lot of humor in it now, actually, because comparing how I am now, like normal, to how I was, I think it's quite comical, actually, how it works. I don't know. It's I'm glad I can find some humor in it, looking back at it, I guess.
Yeah.
But I it's weird to say, but I'm kind of grateful for having experienced it. But I didn't think a human could experience that kind of turmoil, at least not for so. I felt like I had it for so long, and then suddenly I realized, okay, I'm just living. I'm just back to normal now, and it's weird to think about.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it. I didn't know that a human could experience that kind of turmoil. That's a really good way of saying it. And it is that. I mean, I think that, like, when I had those first days and weeks of it, and months, when I didn't know what was happening, and like, that's such a good word, turmoil. It's just like you're just like thrown into a washing machine, and just like, and you're kind of inside going, "Where's my life? What happened to all that stuff I was doing?" It's like, no, you're just in constant fear and constant terror, and you don't understand it. But looking back on it now, is like, when I speak to people about it, I do tend to, just like you were saying, if you find the humor in it, and there's humor in it, and there's strength in it. So I didn't know that it was possible for a human to experience that amount of turmoil, but not only that, but to come out on the other side of it and feel stronger, and to laugh about it is such a positive thing. and a great way to contextualize even the most difficult of experiences, you know. Yeah. Hans, how was the DP manual helpful in your recovery?
It helped. I felt like the turning point was actually when I started to, you know, as I said, understand it. And by listening to the DP manual, I don't know for how many hours every day, every walk I went on and stuff, just reconditioning my thought processes, I guess, to not like fear it so much. And because I was afraid of letting go and kind of surrendering control and surrendering, you know, my grasp of the feelings, because I felt like if I did that, I would just slip further in to some other hell, you know. But when I, you know, using the manual, just reconditioning my brain a little bit, and finding that you have to surrender, you have to like loosen the grip of this stuff. It's not going to get worse if you just calm down and live your life.
So one last question, Hans. There'll be people watching the channel who are going through something very similar to what you experienced. Maybe even folks who had gone through a bad time on acid and maybe trying to figure it out. So as someone who's been through it and come out the other side stronger, what advice would you have for anyone going through it?
Just relax. Realize that, as I wrote in the comment on one of your videos, it's no matter how mind-bogglingly, if that's a word, how intense or bad your symptoms feel, it doesn't matter how bad they are. Actually, it's you will still recover, even though you've no matter how long you've experienced it or how bad it feels. It's kind of inevitable to recover, I feel like, if you take the right steps. And it's not a life sentence, as I thought for a long time. Just understand the mechanics of it, and then it goes away.
Yeah, absolutely. It's absolutely not a life sentence, and it absolutely goes away. Hans, it's been so lovely having you on the channel today. I really appreciate your time and your insight. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for getting back on the YouTube video and just dropping the comment, which is what put us back in touch. I was like, Hans is, you know, I'm delighted that you can pop by the channel and share your advice, both in comments on this video, and I'm sure people appreciate it. I certainly appreciate it. So listen, keep up the good work. If you've got any musical links or any production work to share in future, send it on to me, and I'll be happy to add it to any of these add to the videos. It's been lovely speaking with you, Hans. Thanks so much for your time. Enjoy life post recovery, and keep up the good work. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Take care.